right. Let's try this again. Good evening and welcome to my show. My name is Patrick Bergy, and I'm doing a quick little Bergy bit here. I'll be posting this to the American Awakening and the shadownet hacker site on Vimeo and Patreon. And basically, this is just a quick little Bergy bit here. Bergy bit is a thing, by the way. It's a tiny iceberg, you know. So it seemed appropriate, being my last name was Bergy. Um, what I wanted to do tonight is just to thank the patrons that have supported me over the last few days. I wanted to introduce myself to everyone, give you a little bit of a background. I'm gonna be posting some more things, more Bergy bits, and more like 1 hour shows that I try to do like every week. I was doing some of these back in April, May, June. You'll find them online at YouTube. But ran into some technical problems, which I, resolved best that I could. But it's sort of, definitely spitting band-aids, I guess. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch the Bergy Bit intro, uh, and then we'll get into the show. Thank you very much for joining.
Guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society.
All right, and we're back. I have a longer intro for the 1 hour show, and my friend and roommate, not Gay J. He's my roommate, so I always introduce him as not Gay J. Just make sure everything's clear there. It helps me out on some of the episodes, but I got to get a better mic set up because, as it stands, I'm the only one that can be on the mic right now. Um, so a lot of the a lot of the resources that we have here are absolutely maxed out. But it's not about all the bells and whistles. This isn't meant to be a Hannity show or a Dan Bongino. They have their thing, and I enjoy them actually. Some of them sometimes. And what this is, excuse me, what this is it's my attempt to articulate clearly a very important message, things that I learned, um, things that I understand and see because of things I've done, places I've gone, people I've worked for. And since 2015, when I left my last contract with the company Dynology, um, I've basically been trying to get this message out. And I've gone to the FBI, I've gone to my congressman, I've gone to the inspector general. This that story is not what this is about, and I don't want to, go drifting out of scope here. What this is about is an introduction of myself, right? Um, so with that, what I'll do is bring us down into my other screen, and hopefully this will work now, to be able to tell you a little bit about myself. Now, it worked that time. So, in 2004, actually, let's go back just a little bit, real quick, right? So, I get married to my first wife in 1999, and we had our first daughter. She was born Mia. She was born October 30th, 2000, right? And we went to Disney World uh, just before she was born in 2000. My wife and I did. And while we were there, we were like, "Hey, what a great idea! We're finally going to be able to, finally be able to come back to Disney World with like kids instead of us just going there like we usually did We live in Florida, so you get discounts, right? And so we made reservations at Cinderella's Castle because you got to make them like a year in advance. And we made them on our anniversary, which would have been which was no, uh, September 19th, right? So we were married on September 19th, 1999. My daughter was born um, October 2000. So yeah, everything's cool there, folks. And on that anniversary, as everyone knows, we went and like I said, you have to make these reservations a year in advance. There's like a million people every day that would go to Disney World, and we went to Disney World, and but what? Well, actually, 9/11 happened, right? And then a week after 9/11, a little more than a week, we had our reservations at Cinderella's Castle, and I was like, I'll be damned if I'm gonna let these terrorists win by keeping me from Disney. Because if you remember at the time, everybody was freaked out about anthrax and such. So uh, we went, right? It was an amazing trip, actually. There was like maybe 1 to 200 people in the entire park for the Magic Kingdom and Epcot Center the whole day, right? It was amazing. Normally there's a million people. That day there was a little over 100. It was you're next in line on everything. We walked into Cinderella's castle with our stroller, and we were like, yeah, we have reservations, and there were 6 people in the whole place. So it was about that time, you have kids. We had the 2000 election, which the dangling Chad debacle here in Florida kind of bothered me. And Pasco County had come up with the idea of fixing, or Florida came up with the idea of fixing the problem of the dangling Chads by getting rid of the punch card systems that they had and going to touchscreen voting machines. And our county in Pasco was looking at spending about $7 million on those. And I was like, well, that's stupid, what a waste of money. Spend that on laptops for kids and just. There were other options. I was working for a heart and vascular clinic. I was a network administrator for a heart and vascular clinic over in Tampa. I was, very familiar with information security and such. I was, cybersecurity guy for several years at the time, hardware, networks, and such. And I just saw that as being a really bad idea. So I ran for, so I went down to Publix, stood in front of Publix with my now 2 daughters at that time. This was 2004. And I stood out in front of Publix, collected 2,312 petitions, got my name on the ballot to run for election supervisor in Pasco County. I ran with no political affiliation. I think that's important because people try to, um, as a whistleblower, I don't want someone thinking that this is just a partisan thing. And, that's what they do. The whistleblower that Trump's dealing with right now apparently has some pretty interesting partisan ties, but I don't know. I know he's not a first-hand whistleblower. He has no first-hand knowledge, which is kind of like stupid. Why'd they ever let that happen? The information I have is all first-hand, so that makes me a lot different here. But anyway, so I got up on the you can see up on the screen hopefully there the St. Pete Times article. I don't know if it's coming in very good or not. I can't see it enlarged here, but you can Google me and you'll see like supervisor of elections. You'll see that I got almost 18% of the vote running with no political affiliation. I'm proud of that, right? I learned a lot about politics. I learned a lot about fake news and how corrupt the news media is. Oh my goodness. I learned about how corrupt the Democrats were. I learned about how corrupt the Republicans were. So it's really hard to paint me with a partisan brush. Trust me there. Um, Jump ahead real quick. I held the only Obama for America meetup in all of Baghdad, Iraq, but we'll get to that. After the election that I lost, predictably, but like I said, with 18% of the vote, wasn't too bad. running against a 26-year incumbent, a six-term incumbent who had just switched from Democrat to Republican, right? I was proud of that. So what I did is I enlisted in the Army. Seemed like the next logical thing to do, right? You've got a wife, two kids, a minivan, a mortgage in Pasco County. Um, even though I had no intentions or plans on winning, the defeat was there was defeat in many ways, right? Because my objective was to try to stop the touchscreen voting machines, and I failed at doing that. They purchased touchscreen voting machines. The guy that I ran against, Kurt Browning, he was the most staunch advocate for touchscreen voting machines in the state of Florida. He was a former election supervisor, like the head of the Florida election supervisor thing, and just a very powerful person, right? And so he was totally for the touchscreen machines. I was against him. He was a partisan election official who had just switched from Democrat to Republican after 26 years. He really can't do anything more partisan, if you ask me. And I ran with no political affiliation. So the points I was trying to make were there. Ironically, he ends up winning. Shortly after, he gets tapped by Charlie Crist, who had won that year as well. Yeah, Charlie Crist was running as a Republican governor. Charlie Crist has then switched to independent, then switched to Democrat. I'm not sure what he is now, but he was when I lived over in Clearwater. He was like my one of my two most worthless congressmen I've ever met. So that's where we're at right now. It doesn't matter what their political affiliations are. My Democrat congressman and my Republican congressman are both completely worthless. So I so he gets tapped as Secretary of State for Florida. And one of his first acts of duty, his first acts of business, is God is my witness. You can Google this. There are plenty of articles on it. He turns around and bans touchscreen voting machines. So yeah, the guy that I ran against, whose entire campaign and platform was based on how we need to spend, I think Florida spent like 70 some million in touchscreen voting machines. Pasco County spent something like 7 million. He turns around, wins the office, gets tapped as Secretary of State, turns around, bans touchscreen voting machines, and replaces them with optical scanning systems. The exact systems I based my entire platform on, right? So that sucked, right? I didn't just lose. I was just so blown away by how corrupt and broken the system is. He turned down an offer because these systems were only a couple years old. He turned down an offer from the voting machine manufacturers who were going to buy them back, these $7,000 a piece machines back for $1 a piece. He got offended by that. There's an article in the Miami Herald, I think, that goes into all this. He turns them down and instead sends about 30 million of them that we still owed money on to a shredding facility in Tampa, and just sold them for parts. Separated the parts out, sold those for pennies on the dollar, and then shredded the rest of the what couldn't be resold into recycling material. It's just amazing. In Florida alone, something like $30 million worth of computers were just basically shredded or thrown away that still owed the money on. So they still owed the 30 million on it, but they shredded them. So yeah, it's disappointing, right? And so I lose the election, and I'm hanging out in my backyard. I'm working, but I'm coming home after work, and I'm like building a pond, right? What do you do? What does a guy do when he's trying to work through his issues? So I built this big pond with a big angel with water shooting out of her and everything. It was pretty cool. Had fish in it, and but then I'm like, I'm like, yeah, there's got to be something I can do. There's a war going on. My next door neighbor was Fred Taylor, who I hope to have on the show in the coming weeks. Fred was a three-time Purple Heart recipient in um, Vietnam, a man that I look up to and respect and admire very much. And so I, talked to Fred and inspired by Fred and just sort of inspired by the fact that we were at our military enlistment was at 20% of where it needed to be, and they were going around to like underprivileged schools and pulling kids out of enticing kids out of school because nobody were at war. We were in two wars, and our enlistment was at 20% of where it needed to be, and I'm like 39 years old, right? So I go down to the recruiter's office and they're like, "Oh, you're too old," but they had my information. And then a couple months go by, through the summer, and I get an email from the recruitment office that said they had just raised the enlistment age from 35 to 39 for the Army Reserves, and they said I turned 40 because I turned 40 in December. If I still wanted to enlist, I could do it, but I had to be on like the next bus out. So I go down. I was actually I go down. I go to MEPS, and here we are. That was the enlistment actually there, right? So okay, so that's election, and I go back to enlistment. See, like I said, you go to war with the tools you got, not you want. So I enlist. Excuse me, I'm sorry. And in this article, I don't know if you can see it. If you can, it says bound for boot camp. He's booted from his job. I lost my job. I was fired. Uh, I did file a lawsuit afterwards, which I won for a violation of the Soldiers and Sailors Act. And but that was all happening while I was in going through basic training, and I had to survive basic training before I could ever even I'd burn a lot of bridges, right? My job was gone, and it's like now you got to survive basic training. So that may have been one of the things that helped get me through it. I literally turned 40 years old uh, doing the live fire low crawl at Fort Benning, and although somebody else ended up on Time Magazine who was 39 as being the first to complete at that age, to my knowledge, I'm the first 40-year-old because I actually turned 40 at basic training in the history of Fort Benning to have completed basic training. So this is a shot of my kids graduate and myself on graduation. Right, very proud moment. Broke me physically, broke me mentally. Oh my God. Basic training is definitely made for someone much younger, right? And I'm gonna push this along because I'm running at 18 minutes now, and this was supposed to be a short Bergy bit. So, any rate, I go through basic training, and I ended up joining my unit with JCSE, Joint Communication Support Element, over at MacDill. A really high-speed unit. Um, I was a PFC, where pretty much everybody else in that unit, with the exception of maybe one or two other guys, was a sergeant or above. It provides tip of the spear comms for CENTCOM, right? So I mean, this is a big deal. So, but I had a really strong background in computers and such. So I got stationed with JCSE. I was actually one of the first 10 people with the JCSE, 4th JCS, the ARE, the Army Reserve Element, right? Because they had just funded it, just stood it up. So I come in there, there's like 10 guys in the unit. I'm like at that point the only private, and but I had a good computer background, so I actually brought a lot to the table. These were all we deployed what was called a SCIP, the SC2IP, which was Small Command and Control over IP, and these were portable satellite communication systems where we could deploy remotely anywhere in the world in a matter of less than 20 minutes. I could set up Sipper Nipper. I could set up classified, unclassified network on a dozen computers and a dozen VoIP phones in literally 20 minutes anywhere in the world under any conditions, right? Absolutely very cool stuff. Um, shortly after, shortly, well, actually, it was like, well, about 9 months after I got out of AIT, which you have a lot of time on your hand. I actually fast tracked through AIT. But I came home in really good shape 9 months later, though. My wife's given birth to twin sons. Didn't see that. So now I got four kids. I'm a PFC in the Army with the best of intentions, trying to do the right thing. But I'm a PFC in the Army with four kids. That was tough. So the let me switch over. So it's a little bit bigger. Me and full. There we go. So um, my kids are born. I actually was supposed to go out on the first deployment with our unit. This was actually it ticked me off, not because I like think I'm a bad father, but because there were people over there. There were soldiers overseas in combat zones that had been whose kids were born um, while they were deployed, and I was scheduled to go out on that first deployment. My colonel, he pulled me from that, and I was actually quite upset about that. He had his. I'm glad he did. Right. Um, my boys were born, and I was there. That was a pretty disgusting scene, I must tell you. Even though I already had two daughters, that was a whole nother thing right there. So I go to my first deployment, just a few weeks actually after my first sons were my sons were born, my twin sons, and I deployed with my unit to Afghanistan, Kandahar. Provided tip of the spear support for the fusion cell, the Kandahar fusion cell in RC South. We did really good stuff. I really started to learn how jacked up the government was at that point, how jacked up the military was. Literally, they screwed up my orders when I was a month out from coming back. It was a 6 month deployment, it wasn't that long. They screwed my orders up, though. And this butterbar comes up to me, my lieutenant, and he says, "Hey, Bergy, we made a mistake with your orders, and you're not going to get paid the last month that you're over here." And I mean, like, oh Jesus, right? I'm making the pay. I'm living off the money of a PFC. I had a good job. I was making good money. I was paying. I got a wife now, four kids, a minivan, a mortgage. I've got all these things, and I'm surviving off of a, the payment, the salary of a deployed PFC, which was horrible. It was like less than like $2,000 a month after taxes. And I'm sitting over there, by the way, the whole time, with more knowledge than half the guys sitting next to me that are contractors, and they're making 240,000, 240,000 a year. And the first 100,000 was tax free. My church helped raise money to help provide some support for my wife and kids while I was. I mean, the community was great. There was so much. With all my complaining, you're never gonna. I always have to make sure that I point out there was so much good that I saw, and there was so much good that we did. But then there was so much bad. There was so much fraud, waste, and abuse, and so much. And when they did that, when they screwed that up, um, that put me in the position of how do I provide for my kids, right? And my wife and my kids back home. We're struggling as it is, and he hands me a piece of paper with a phone number on it that says, "Here, you can call this number for a low interest loan to help you get by until you get back." Oh my God, right? So I get back. I actually, I felt I had no choice, right? What do you do? I'm put in an impossible position. I did. So I go down to the JAG, and I'm like, listen, they screwed up my orders. I'm not going to get paid. And the guy and these two colonels are like, what? They throw me in the back of their truck, and we drive over to have a little conversation with that butter bar. And they're like, listen, You're gonna fix this right now. Either he's paid by the end of the week or he's on a plane back. And I'm like, I don't want to be on a plane back. I just want to get paid. No, take that up. But they're like, no, you can't be out here if you're not getting paid. Nobody on in CAF is going to be here that's not getting paid. So they don't get me paid. They fly me back. They stick me in a 200-man transient tent and forget about me for about 3 weeks in one of the stands. Um, I can't remember where, but oh dear God, it was a miserable place. I ended up getting, even though I left like a month before the rest of the team that I deployed out with, they got back the same day I did, right? So I mean, they just treated me like crap because, oh, you went over your command's head by just because you couldn't suck it up. What? Think what you want about that. But these guys were jerks. They did crappy job, and I didn't go through all this. I didn't survive basic training. I didn't do everything that I did. I didn't go out to Afghanistan, leaving my family behind to not get paid. How do you do that, right? So when I got back, I was immediately put on. They released everybody else that had deployed over with me off active duty. So because we were reserves, you get back and you go back to work and you get paid. You get paid a little bit more money when you deploy when you're in a combat zone, but you lose that money when you come back. So what do? They keep me on orders, and they keep me on orders with like no money, less money than I was making over in Afghanistan to provide for my family. So finally, I said, listen, I applied for a job. Uh, I, I I applied for a job with a company called Dynology. They needed someone that had the clearance that I had, and they were doing an IAA project, a uh, brand new thing, never had been done, apparent from what I was told at the time, by the DoD. I mean, there might be other agencies or organizations that did, but that was the first, right? So I went to my commander and I said, "Listen, I can't survive. I can't do this." I had been like just a little over 2 years in the military, and in the army. Most every bit of the time was active duty. So the commander and the sergeant major come up to me and they're like, "Well, I tell you what, you dropped the IG complaint uh, that we did that you filed over in Kandahar, and we'll not only let you take that job, we'll throw you into IRR so you don't have to come back here every for 2 weeks out of the year and come back and do your reserve training." And at this point, my the my go in and kick some ass and be a soldier thing was like pretty much broken by these potato heads at that point, who were just it was just abuse at that point. It was retaliation, and literally, here, you drop this and we'll let you go. You don't, and you're going to have to stay here in the States making maybe 14, living with a family of four, living on about $1,400 a month. What would you do, right? Judge me. What would you do? So I said, fine. And I was honorably discharged, having completed my required time of service, which is calculated based on my active duty hours. Excuse me. And I took that job over in Iraq. I spent a year with Dynology in Iraq, where I pioneered what ended up becoming the shadownet. Right now, this is pretty much where I'm gonna end this little introduction of myself. The shadownet, what I will say is, the shadownet is the commercial name of what we ended up building on a taxpayer-funded DoD contract in Iraq. And then the people that I worked for, kept the intellectual property rights for it when we were done after the year, and we came back and named it and made it commercially available, right? Um, Let me do one more thing here to let you understand a little bit more. Now, the people that I worked, I'm not even going to say that yet. If you're watching this, you probably know, but for theatrical purposes, I'm going to show you something here to maybe help you understand why I did what I did. And I don't know if you can see this. Done there. I don't know if you can read this. I'm going to pull it up on my end over here. So bear with me one moment so I can read it for you. And this will explain to you why I did what I did starting in 2015. Okay? Bear with me one moment here. Unbelievable. Here we are. Okay, so much for having a well oiled machine. Jason does such a good show with Crowdsource the Truth. Everything's all nice and well organized. Come on, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Okay, here it is. So you may be able to read it and see it anyway, but I'm going to read it for you here. As soon as it pulls up, my system takes forever, especially when I'm running this right now. Probably going to screw everything up. But this is from a guy named David Haas. He was the guy I answered to in 2015. Originally, I answered to somebody else. Are you kidding me? Originally, I answered to somebody else, which we'll go into, and then I'll end this. But this was the one of the last emails I got before leaving my job in South Korea, a contract I was working for Dynology in South Korea. I'd been there for 5 years. Um, I'm going to do a whole nother separate segment on that, which will just absolutely blow your mind. But in a nutshell, I was retaliated against for just refusing to place company before country, going back for a year and a half, right? And the story, this story will blow your mind. It's way too complicated to get into, but it's just, oh my God, astounding. And so I filed a uh, I filed a formal complaint when I was threatened, when my job was threatened, because by a division chief for um, not allowing him access to a classified network that he didn't have the required memorandums for and the required skill set or training for. It would have violated the law, right? And it would have been bad for him because if you don't know what you're doing and you're given administrative rights, you can do things to hurt yourself and not even know, right? So I filed a complaint, and the next day after filing that complaint, um, the program manager came to me and said, "Listen, and the guy was screaming and yelling so loud at me. The guy next to me, saying that I was going to be fired if I didn't do this, and this had been going on for a long time, for a year and a half. It's not what you think, right? And the guy, he was yelling and threatening me so loud. The guy next to me, the contractor next to me, also filed a complaint himself, supporting everything that I said, right? And the next day, the 24 hours later, after I filed a complaint of abuse formally, um, they told me that they were going to modify the $12 million contract that I had been working on for the last that I've been working on for the last 5 years. That modification was only going to remove the requirements for my position, and they did. And the other guy shut up. I didn't, right? So um, I was forced out of my job. A couple days after I got back to the States, they modified the contract back to its original requirements, effectively firing me and replaced me, right? So um, nobody can look at that the day something like that happening, the day after a whistleblower files a protected disclosure, right? And not say that, wow, there's something there, but no. And I filed an IG whistleblower complaint Nobody did anything. They said, "Oh well, you're a subcontractor, so you weren't protected at the time, even though the IG's website clearly said that subcontractors were protected." So I want to read you this email, and we're going to finish up here real quick, right? But not reading you the whole thing, but just the bottom that I've highlighted, because the rest of it's just garbage anyway, right? It was BS. It had nothing to do with the actual reason that this contract had been modified and that I had been replaced. And I was trying to tell them, and I was trying to tell David and Jim that listen, this is really jacked up. It doesn't have to be this way. There are ways that we can fix this that actually helps the government. Excuse me. And the response from Dynology from Jim was, it would be nice. This is a response to me. They said, it would be nice if everyone acted on principle, as you do. But that is typically not how the world works. And you will not find peace if you expect others to operate from a sense of what is right, rather than from a sense of what is best for them. I'm discussing this with Jim, and we'll do what is in Dynology's long-term interest, operating in a way that will grow our work share over time. I'll be in touch. Now, why is this significant? Because the Jim that he was referencing was the president of Dynology, and also he was the son of Obama's national security advisor, General James Jones, who owned the company. Dynology was a small 15-person or so company, right? So this would be like an email from Hunter Biden, right? Dynology had been making General Jones had been making for decades, and his son for decades, millions and millions of dollars, not selling shoes like the Democrats. Hypocrisy with Ivanka would want you to believe is the worst thing in the world, profiting from shoes while your father's the president. No, this is the son of the NATO Supreme Allied Commander, the son of Obama's national security advisor, profiting not just for him, but for this is for a company that they're all connected to. Hell, Big Jim, General Jones's office is right there in the center of Dynology. It's the biggest office in Dynology, which is on the 15th floor of the Towers Crescent building in Virginia. Um, Tyson's Corner. If you know that place, you know what kind of money we're talking here. So when let me read that just really quick again. It would be nice if everyone acted on principle as you do, but that is typically not how the world works. And you will not find peace if you expect others to operate from a sense of what's right rather than from a sense of what's best for them. I'm discussing with Jim, and we'll do what's in Dynology's long-term interest, operating in a way that will grow our work share over time. Does that sound like honor or integrity from the son and of the NATO Supreme Allied Commander, from the son of Obama's national security advisor, the people responsible for keeping us out of wars? Does that sound like they have any interest other than profiting from wars? I was a patriot. I sacrificed everything. I've suffered from PTSD since my first deployment to Afghanistan. I've my first marriage to my wife and kids, to my wife, who's the mother of my kids, ended in uh, 2010, right after I arrived in South Korea. Right, I can't I can't get out of my head some of the things that I've seen, some of the things I've done. Right, it's a common it's a common thing that people suffer from. But is that how our government's supposed to work? They've destroyed my life. There ain't no kidding about that. I live on 70% disability now with the VA, service connected, and It's a struggle for me every day to try to show, to try to fix what's so clearly broken. I've really tried hard. I ended up having some major had prostate surgery a couple years ago. Had no insurance at that time. Uh, my life has been an absolute struggle since the person, since Obama's national security advisor and his son wrote me that letter. You telling me that Jim didn't know? I want to know, did General James Jones, four-star General James Jones, NATO Supreme Allied Commander, did he know about what was in that letter? Did he know what they did to me? He know what they did to their country, to national security. Now, what you're going to find out in the coming weeks is that the stuff that I developed, I started discovering that, I started noticing that techniques and things that we had developed as part of the shadownet, which we had made commercially available, were starting to be used. I started to see them. I saw uh, hints of it during the Michael Brown riots. My partner who was working with me in South Korea, he verified the pings back to actually a Ukrainian server, and but yet it was pretty clear that it was the assets were in the Ukraine, but it was an IIA. They were influencing the Michael Brown riots, which is what which what which is what brought rise to Black Lives Matter and the horrible treatment of police and law enforcement for ever since, right? Our partner at the time that we made this commercially available, the shadownet, which was the exact same capability that Robert Mueller indicted the 13 Russians for last year. Our partner at that time, and I didn't find this out till 2015, till late 2015. That's why my focus shifted from just being sure guilty, pissed off because of what that letter says right there. Clearly clearly I was doing the right thing. But that's not how the relationship between the military industrial complex and our government is supposed to work, apparently. And the moment you stop playing ball with them, the moment you stop placing company before country, is when your life will be destroyed by them. I went from at the highest point, $240,000 I made in 1 year, in 2000, from 2007 to 2008. Every year since then, I made that I worked overseas, and I was overseas supporting our Department of Defense in Iraq, Afghanistan. I went back to Afghanistan again, spent several months in Kabul on an IA project there with the IOTF, the Information Operations Task Force. Right? These people destroy. I'm making $120,000 a year. They destroyed my life. They've destroyed everything about it. Not just them, right? How does a person deal with all of that? At the same time, he's dealing with things that he hasn't been able to get out of his mind from the previous decade to begin with, things that he's struggling with, right? Things that he's not facing, that he's allowing to, things that I allowed myself to, because I face it, I just put myself into my work. Like I said, I spent 7 years overseas providing for my kids instead of coming back and facing and dealing with some major issues that I have from things that I've done and saw that I can't ever speak of, right? It's too classified, but you can't even imagine. You can't even imagine. So imagine going through life with something eating you up inside that you can't ever talk about, and I won't. I swore a sacred oath to it. But I just avoided dealing with it. I'm dealing with it now. I've been dealing with it for about the last year or so with the VA. They've been very helpful. Uh, when I started, though, seeing everything that was going on with uh, the Russian collusion hoax, I know how these people work. I know how they operate. I pioneered the same tools they're using. 8 people, actually, it's more like 10 or 12 now. Since throw in the chalupas, I guess. 8 people or more directly connected to Mueller indictments in 2 companies, Wikistrat and Cygroup, which were directly connected to the Cambridge Analytica scandal, are all directly connected to my shadownet project. And that's not this project. That's not the name of the project. That's not the name of the project. The classified project. Shadownet was a commercial name for it. You'll see. You've seen it. You can go to my website and see. I put flyers on. I'm not talking about anything classified. I'm talking about flyers that were made commercially available. And that's what I do. I won't violate my sacred trust. I'll let it destroy me personally first before I will. But what I have done is I figured out a way to try to get my message out in a way that doesn't violate that sacred oath by just talking about things that are publicly available and public knowledge, that I probably would have figured out anyway because I was a sleuthy IT guy that didn't have a huge trust for the government to begin with. But there are things that I can't take out of my mind that also help me put together why we are where we're at. It helps me to understand it. So when you see this garbage on the news, all the news, Fox News, everybody, I don't care. Um, we are being played. General Jones literally just partnered with uh, Facebook to restore election integrity worldwide. The guy that I built the shadownet for, he was the chairman of the board for Atlantic Council. Again, I'm going over that. I'll break these down. I've broken them down before. I've gone to speaking events. I've gone all over the place. Um, these guys, there is a game being played, an influence operations game, by people that we hired to and gave this sacred trust. And these people need to answer for it. So what we're trying to do is, and it's not going to happen. I wanted to try it. I would love to try to figure out a way to go to DC by October 23rd, because Mark Zuckerberg's going to be testifying before Congress, and we need to have this information, which is so well documented, impossible, the most forensically documented evidence you could possibly have, right? We need to ask some questions of Mark Zuckerberg when he goes before Congress on the 23rd. I'm not going to make it there in time, but with your help, with the Patreon's help, perhaps I can put this together in a more articulated way through video, um, and perhaps we can help push this message beyond their power to suppress it, and start asking these congressmen, senators, and all of these other people that we've entrusted, that we elected and entrusted, people, we need to put aside the partisan politics. It's if it's not obvious to everyone that this is nothing but a political game to every single person in office, then you're not paying attention. You're just gone, right? They've already got you. We made one of the things that we made the shadownet commercially available for was the ability to influence U.S. elections. It was discussed absolutely with the president of the company, Jim Jones, by me. at a lunch in Tyson's Corner. Paul Manafort, all of these people, all of our was our partner at the time. John McCain, McCain's McCain's security, IT security during his 2008 presidential campaign, and they did the same shenanigans then as they're doing now. I have very strong evidence that the shadownet was used to influence 2010 Ukrainian elections, not sanctioned by Obama, not sanctioned by our government, but as a side deal for millions of dollars by people like Paul Manafort, most likely General Jones, Jim Jones. They were their number one partners, number one preferred partners. This is all easily documented, all well documented, easily verified. And like I said, I'll be putting this stuff out um, over the next few weeks. More. I've done several interviews. I've been interviewed. I've had other people like Ann Vandersteel do my stuff. I've clearly gone. Uh, well, we're at 51 minutes, 15 seconds, so I've clearly gone over my 5 to 10 minute idea with the Bergy bit thing. So when we're done, I'm going to put the full one on the end to close out this video. But people, I can't do this alone. I've tried as hard as I can, but I am just too freaking small. There was a time when everybody that I met was blown away at what I was at the sacrifices that I made of enlisting at 39, turning 40, doing the stuff that I did when nobody else was stepping up. And now those same people that tell you that they support their troops, the same people that sent me over there have thrown me under the bus. I've got right here received August 25th, 2017, received 8/24/2017, so that was the day after. This is to the Honorable Honorable Gus Bilirakis, yeah, my worthless Republican congressman. Department or agency, FBI. See attached. I wrote see attached. I want the status. I want the status of my complaint to the FBI. I haven't had a response in a year and a half. I contacted them several times since. This is the same thing, only going into the fraud, waste, and abuse that I was denied for by the OIG. So what's a year and a half from 8/24/17? That's before the election, people. If they would have listened to me, if Gus Bilirakis wasn't such a worthless piece of crap, and he is. He's only there because of his dad's name. Congressman Gus Bilirakis took over after his father left office for probably 20 or 30 years, Congressman Mike Bilirakis. So for the last 50 years, Pasco County's been stuck with this complete and utter bullshit, and I'm sorry. That's why we end up with $7 million in Pasco County with touchscreen voting machines that ended up getting sent back to shredders. That's why when someone who could have prevented everything that we've witnessed in our 2016 presidential election, had they only listened, do you think this would have been going on with the Russian collusion if they were under investigation? The key people involved, the key people at the top. It could have changed everything, but nobody does nothing. Fox News, don't count on any of them. Judge Janine, don't count on her. I'll go into that later. She's known since December 18th. Sarah Carter, she's known since January 13th. What do you do, folks? Like I said, at one point in my life, I was blown away by the support that I had gotten from, everybody in our country for doing something that nobody else was stepping up to do. 20% of what needed to be anyway. So not nobody. My story, my problems, the things I've seen and done, um, yeah, they might be, oh Jesus, yeah, they're probably worse than 99% of the people's out there, but that doesn't make them any worse. That doesn't make the power of them any worse. There are good people in my life that are trying to help out, um, but we don't need much, right? We just need to be able to get this message out. My microphone's going to fall apart. Our democracy could die in darkness because of the $5 headset that I bought at a pawn shop. Right? So, folks, I could use your help. Sorry for turning this 5-minute thing into a 50-minute thing, but I thought it would be a good way. You guys have contributed a couple bucks here and there, and that's more than I can contribute to most things. I think last year I contributed $5 to Donald Trump, which was all I could do, but I also drove my Harley all around the state of Florida with George Colella. He was one of the co-founders of Bikers for Trump, which he ended up starting. He ended up going with Boots on the Ground Bikers for Trump, which was Florida here, and then now he's got Bikers for 45. I got some good friends, but there's nothing they can do. They get it. We're trying everything that we can do. I don't know why we can't get through to people, right? I don't know why, but we need to do something, because if we don't, we're screwed. We're absolutely screwed. Zuckerberg partnered with the guy that I built the freaking shadownet with. Do you think the rest of them, do you think Twitter's any different? Do you think CNN's not using the company ClearForce, which I'll go into later, which is also owned by Jones and Hayden, clearforce.com, which builds Minority Report like behavioral profiles for both commercial purpose and for companies that have cleared employees? Just change the algorithm that much, and everybody who's got a cleared employee is now going to be getting, and you're gonna start eliminating. These behavioral profiles are used to determine whether they get a job or whether they lose an existing job. So one little small change in the algorithm could have every Trump supporter, based on their social media, based on their criminal background, based on their financial, compiled by AI and spit out into a Minority Report. If you just change that to Trump supporters, if you change that to Democrat and then eliminate all the Democrat, or if you've got CNN doing that, if you find out, how would you like to know if Facebook was using ClearForce? He's partnered with the owner. So how would you like to know if Facebook used ClearForce to do their hiring and put in the algorithm to eliminate anybody that didn't like Trump, to eliminate anybody that didn't like X, Y, or Z? Could be you next time, folks. Don't be too happy just because I said, because it could be Trump. It could be anybody. We need to fix this. We need to look at the emails like that and say, are these the people that we want Facebook partnering with to restore election integrity worldwide? I don't think so. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your support. Good night, and God bless.
Guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society.
Well, I don't know, man.
Yeah, I don't get that, man. They go through all this trouble to get here and then come here and vote Democrat.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals.